Hi, Pauline here again. Doing another little card. This one of a rocky shore with rough water. The first thing I do is do a rough, small drawing, not too elaborate and not too dark so that it doesn't show much through the card at the end. This is a little bit more complicated painting, so you might want to give this card to somebody you really like. So first thing to do is after drawing on the paper and soaking it in the water and then now towel drying it, I will begin to paint. And the first thing that I'll paint is the sky. And I make a mixture, a fairly rich mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. So the burnt sienna is just to tone the blue down a bit. And it's fairly rich, so I'm just going to apply it in the top corner, top right corner of the card, and just slap it on so that it's, not, don't do a graded wash or anything like that. So it's just slapped on nice and loose, and then I'm going to take some water and soften the edge and let the paint run down into the sky. So this is an atmospheric effect, and you might want to do this in other paintings because it's a nice way to do a sky. Then I could leave it here, but I think I'm going to add a little bit more paint to bring it down a bit on the right hand side. So I'll do that. Same mixture. Bring it down a little bit on the right hand side. Then when it's being washed down, you want to stop it from going any farther. So you might at this point want to use a paper towel just to stop the water from going down. So it looks like a rough water, but splashing up, but it also keeps the paint from running down into your rock shape. So then the next thing is to mix the paint for the rock, and that would be same thing, burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Nice rich puddle, but more on the little bit more on the burnt sienna side than the sky. So dark paint, and come in and just do loose, rough shapes. No careful painting here. It's everything is just kind of loose and rough in order to make the same kind of a painting, a nice loose painting. So just slap the paint on. And then at the bottom, because there is water against the rock, you want, rather than having a sharp hard edge at the bottom, you want it nice and soft where the water is splashing up. So you just soften that with a wet brush or a damp brush. Just adding a bit more burnt sienna up at the top because that paint kind of pulled away from the top of the rock. So now to continue making the rock shape, this is the way that Peter always did. And I have a razor blade, and I'm gonna pull the paint. So what you need you to do is to put the blade down on the paper, slant it, and then press on the edge and pull it over. You might want to practice this on a piece of paper first. So you don't want to rip the paint, and you don't want to rip the paper, and you want to press it out of the paper so that it makes a shape. So you might want to practice that first. So you need fairly dryish paint, not really wet paint, but fairly dryish paint. And then when you scrape it like that, it will make nice shapes for the rock. Then I did a little bit of I'm squirting a little bit with a water bottle onto the sky, and I'm not actually misting. I'm, hoping that some big droplets fall there. So it would be as if water splashing up into the sky, in front of the sky. So next thing after that is to add some more dark shapes. So I'm just coming in with some dark paint to make shadows and crevices. That I used pretty rich paint so that it didn't run into the lighter areas that were squeezed out. Next thing is to start mixing the greens for the tree shapes, I think. So I made, it was burnt sienna and Prussian and a little bit of hooker's green. And I'm making the tree shapes with a small pointy brush. Here though, the paper is still pretty wet, so it was wet from the sky and not dried enough, so the tree shapes are diffusing rather a lot. So the thing you could do is, once it's a bit drier, you could come in with paint afterwards and make more defined shapes once the whole painting is dried a little tiny bit. So now I'm going to be mixing paint for the water, and this is Peter's favorite way of making waves and a rough water, and that is to mix fairly rich paint and just do quick strokes on the paper, and then to soften the edges of them afterwards. So right now I'm just using mostly the same colors that are in the sky, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and then I'm just going to do like a quick shape like that, and then another one. And then rinse the brush out and use a damp clean brush to soften the edges of the strokes to make it look like rough water, so that there's lots of white in between, and even some spaces where the brush might have, the paint might have skipped over the paper. It doesn't have to be perfect. The rougher the better, if you're painting rough water, that is. So now what I'm doing is I have some of the rock mixture, and I'm just going to use a knife to paint in some crevices, just to give the rock a rougher look, like those big giant rocks on the shores of some of the Great Lakes where the glaciers have gone over and scored them. The knife can be a pretty handy tool. You can even use it for painting trees, I think. It would be easy to like, depending on how dry the paper is and how dry the paint is that's already there, to just do some quick little dead tree shapes. And I think I do one here, but not much, just a bit. The paint is not quite dry enough for that. So the next step would be to try to come in with a bit more of the tree paint to see if I can get some trees to sort of stay there instead of just softening right into the background. You might want to wait a little bit longer to do yours. So I think I mentioned before that there is a book that Peter and I had on Amazon.ca or Amazon.com called 15 Step-by-Step Watercolor Paintings. And you probably know that Peter is no longer with us, and that he's been gone since the fall. So I'm trying to emulate his style in some paintings. Just because we taught together for so long, for so many years. So there you have it. A little watercolor card. So this one here is not done on a watercolor card stock. I did it on actual watercolor paper, 140-pound Arches cold press, and I cut it into a 5x7 shape, and I'm going to just stick it on the front of one of those cards because it's better that way.